Are you freaking kidding me?
Welcome to the Missouri Liberty Report. My name is Patrick Holland, and I'm guest hosting for John Williams tonight. But co-hosting with me is Sam Britton from the Missouri Liberty Radio. Hey, Sam, how you doing, buddy?
We're doing just fine. Finer than frog hair, split three ways.
Wow, that must be a Southern thing because I grew up in Minnesota. I never heard that one before. One of my favorites, though, is.
I've heard that.
Go ahead.
I've still tried to find some people that have tried to stroke some frogs to find out how that looks.
Yep, I got you. One of my favorites when we first moved down here was, well, that made me feel as uncomfortable as a hog on ice.
There you go.
So that was, we don't have that in Minnesota, yet we have ice. So,
yeah.
But not a lot of hogs. So
there you go.
I guess, you just kind of, you roll with the punches when you move to a different area of the country.
Yeah, you do.
Sam, I thought, we could talk about all kinds of things tonight, and we probably will. But I know that I'd like to talk about something that's been going on that a lot of people have been involved in up in Owensville, and that's the school bond issue that you guys have been dealing with up there. And, you have boots on the ground up there. You were involved in a local meeting there. And could we get the latest on that?
Yeah, the latest is that we definitely we had a good vote in our favor. I mean, it was by last I knew 8 votes, if I could talk. But we carried the ball with this, and we're probably one of the few areas that did not pass a school bond this year. And I mean, it was an interesting ride getting this done. I mean, we had one business here kind of give us cold feet where we used to normally meet, but man, we all jumped on the rebound, and we met over at the library, and the library did a real good job of accommodating us, and we had our meeting. I think the meeting went very well. I've got a recording of it, which in fact, I will probably here tomorrow, now that I've got everything fixed around here. That's a whole nother issue I won't bore everybody with, but after computer issues, now I have time to do stuff, and I'll post the audio of that over on my website at molibertyradio.us, and people can go and actually catch that if they would like to and listen to the conversation. But needless to say, we had a lot of people who agreed with us on this. Once you present the facts, it's irrefutable as to why this had to go down the way that it did, because of the fact that with all the information that we've been able to pick up on how this whole thing. First of all, the original bond not having been paid off, and then now the one they were asking for now, and then yet still will likely be coming back trying to get more in the future. It was just time to say enough is enough in view of the fact that we're in a bad economy. And as you know, Patrick, and I know, things are not looking good. You and I have had conversation regarding the BRICS nations pulling out of the dollar, and that does not bode well for us in the future as far as inflation is concerned. And we're looking for any way to get the burden of these taxes, more and more taxes off the back of the taxpayers here in Owensville. And so it was a good fight, and it was amazing how quickly we just, man, when a roadblock got in our way, we just spun our heels and went in a different direction and kept going.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to invite Retha, who's listening in on the live stream, to go ahead and call in. Retha, feel free to call in now, and we'll bring you into the conversation for a little while here. And we'll talk about this, in a kind of a group setting here, much as, the community did, basically to talk about whether or not this was a good idea. I think you're right, Sam. I think a lot of people decided that maybe this isn't a good time financially. There's too much uncertainty out there, and we could talk about the BRICS nations, but remember now, OPEC nations are joining BRICS now too.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia is signing on. So we're talking about the petrodollar here. This is serious stuff. This is not going to go very well for the world reserve currency in the end, unfortunately.
No, it's not.
So
there's just literally no other way to put this. So, once the dollar ceases to become the world reserve currency, then you're headed for trouble.
Hello.
Did we lose you? I'm still here in any event. There we go. I hear something in the background. Anyway, we're sitting in this evening for John Williams, and we're talking about the school bond issue here for those wondering what the discussion is here. And we're still waiting for Patrick to return. But I have to say, as far as all things considered, it did go down very well. And the one thing I wanted to put out a rebuttal to right off the bat is right away you're going to get people who are going to come out and say that, well, you just don't want the kids to have the finer stuff, and that has nothing to do with it. There's a lot of things I want in my own household here too, but I'm not going to get them because I don't want to break my household. And city budgets, school budgets, and everything else have to reflect hard times as well. Patrick, are you still there? I'm getting a lot of beeps and stuff, but I'm not getting him.
He dropped out, Sam, and I'm trying to get him back.
Okay. I should have just had Retha show up on Team Talk. I could have mixed it through.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Sorry, I didn't. Yes, the wonders of computers.
You're right. I know. I mean, hey, I've been fighting them all week.
Yeah, hopefully he can get it figured back out, because not the way we want to do a show.
Yeah.
Unless his computer went crap on him, I don't know. Well, bat poop. I tell you what we can do. You want me to text him and tell him and Retha just to join in on Team Talk?
Yeah, I just discovered I'm going to have to go across the room and launch my server because I forgot to do it, but it won't take long. The server's not running currently. Everything else is running on that machine. John, you wouldn't believe the computer problems I've had this week. I had to totally reformat the hard drive on my server here. So I just got everything back up last night and forgot to launch Team Talk, but it won't take long. So just hang on. I'll go over there and throw that command and we'll get it going.
Go ahead. Well, folks, I'll try to talk, but it ain't going to be worth a crap because, as you can tell, new teeth and still can't pronounce and enunciate very well. And yeah, Doug, we did. We did kill the school bill or the school bond issue. It was an amazing. It was amazing. 8 votes. About 8 votes was the difference in vote between opposing and for, and oh, looks like we might get Patrick back here. Hey, Pat.
Hey there. Well, how do you like that? My internet went down right in the middle of the broadcast.
Doesn't surprise me one bit. And Sam is trying to get Team Talk up in case, like, Retha would. If this happens again, you guys can jump in on Team Talk.
Yep, gotcha. Okay. Well, I am truly sorry that happened right in the middle of the broadcast here. So let me go ahead and get Retha on.
So let me go ahead and bring that up and see if we can get them guys in there. Just tell them to.
Well, he's back on now, Sam.
Okay, good.
He's back in Skype, so.
Yep, we're getting Retha on. Sorry about that, gang.
That's all right.
We're
Gremlins. True ringy dingy.
Come on, Retha, pick up.
I've got.
Please leave your message for.
Okay, she doesn't have her cell phone on, so.
Hello.
Hey, there's Retha.
There you go.
Here I am.
Okay, all right, excellent. Hey, Retha, we've had, as you know, we've had some technical difficulties.
Yep.
But we're up and running again now. And if you remember, I just wanted to bring you into the conversation here to talk about this school bond in Owensville. And basically a little bit from your perspective on a grassroots organization that saw, basically a reason to not allow something like a school theater or a performing arts center to go through at this time, in these trying times, economic times.
Well, yeah, schools have to tighten their belts. They have to be very careful what they get in at this time, just like your homeowners, just like the public, to make sure that they don't have more than they can take care of as well, because inflation affects them.
Hey, Retha, there's a lot of background noise there.
Yeah, I'm only getting about every other word on this end.
Okay, I'll turn up the volume here. And go ahead, Retha. It seems to be quieter there.
Okay, is that any better?
Yep, that's a lot better.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll reiterate. Just like the homeowners feeling that inflation and having to make choices, a homeowner has to make sure that they don't have more than they can chew either. Yeah. And schools need to start around that as well. Make sure that what you have is maintained, taken care of, so on. And is there still feedback?
We're getting a lot of noise. Just came back.
Yeah, and I'm getting every other word. I'm not able to make out much of what's being said. So.
Yeah. Tell you what, why don't you call me on my cell phone or something?
Okay, we'll do that.
What's going on.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow. Sorry, gang.
Yeah, I think what's going on is they're going through 2 different low bit rate connections.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yep, you sure can.
Yeah.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, must have been the phone for some reason. Well, it's on that network too, so you never know.
Yep.
Well, anyway, just like I said, the homeowners have to tighten their belts and they have to be careful what they invest in. They have to be careful, kind of get everything taken care of and make sure the repairs and all that are taken care of. But they're not going to go and build that addition right now. That wouldn't, be a wise choice. Schools should be thinking along those same lines. Like that bond that you guys had, there was stuff on it that I was like, yeah, that should be taken care of. And like the gym floors and things like that. And but when you're putting 10 million of a want on something to get that need, it's going too far because you're putting more debt on the community, and actually you're putting more maintenance on even the school, that they're going to have to deal with later. So to me, I can understand schools wanting to get things done as far as getting the repairs done and getting themselves kind of shored up for whatever may come, just to be on the safe side. But schools need to be thinking along the lines also that, you know what, we just got to make sure our needs are taken care of right now, that everything's in good repair, and so we can weather whatever the storm's going to end up being. So it's a matter of respect to the community, and they just have to be mindful that, sometimes the money flow isn't going to just continue, because we also have to consider the fact that in inflationary period, just like in 2008, a lot of people lost their homes. So that can very well happen again. Well, banks don't pay taxes on homes. So that means there's going to be less revenue coming into the school.
Yes, indeed. And
so go ahead.
Let me ask you, is the audio on your monitor?
No, that's all on pause.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Okay, gotcha. So we're hearing that noise, but it's not terrible. We can still hear you.
Yeah, by the time it gets over to my end,
by
the time it gets over to my end, I'm still having trouble understanding some stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably because this is between cell phone and home phone. The same thing is happening, oddly enough.
Well, I go outside, but people are mowing. So.
Yep, gotcha.
I'll go into another room here, see if that's any better.
Okay.
Get away from.
Now, this is a grassroots effort that happened in Owensville, actually, it was more of an education campaign than it was anything else from everything that I saw. Would you agree with that, Retha?
Oh, absolutely. An education has to be had.
Why do you think it is that the educators weren't interested in educating the people on the issues?
Well, if they did, then it'd be way harder to get a bond through. They have to make it appear that there is no other way, or that this is very necessary. If people were educated in the fact that, well, like Orangeville, for example, well, they're getting an extra over $1 million over the last 5 years in extra revenue. Okay, they have no internal debt, which means that they could create some. See, these things that Orangeville needs right now, they could actually create internal debt, do an internal bond, and it would be we would be none the wiser. Let's just put it that way. As far as the community is concerned, because that comes out of their own budget. Okay,
yeah.
Schools can do this, and they don't have any right now, so they could get those gym floors fixed. There's things that they could do, and they just create that internal debt. And considering they're getting an extra $1 million of the home, everybody's money in the community, there is a little wiggle room. They could do that. So it's not like, oh, well, the taxpayers voted it down, it's over, for getting those so-called needs done, some of them. And they could do them over time. It was going to be over time anyway. That Performing Arts Center would have taken approximately 3 years to build.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, it is an education. And the problem is it's very difficult to be educated, because you have to have poignant questions. You have to pinpoint the questions, because they aren't going to give up the information freely.
That's a good point, Retha. And Sam was there at the local meeting. And
Mhm.
of course, no one, as far as we know, I mean, actually, no one from the school board or the administration did come to the meeting, to address these concerns. But we did have some spouses of folks that did come by and talk about it. But Sam, would you say that they addressed the people's concerns?
Um, I don't really, I don't really think they did. Really, I mean, the thing is, what you've got with all of this is they're always going to justify their wants. I mean, and they're going to justify it as needs, and when in reality they're wants, and that's the main thing that I'm finding more than anything else. And like I pointed out during the meeting, I said, here's the problem. I said, first of all, I said we have to tighten our belts at home. Then it doesn't matter if it's a school, it doesn't matter if it's a city government or whatever. I said everybody else has to learn to tighten their belts because there's only so much to go around. And the other thing I pointed out after much discussion on the thing, I said, if you want to really get technical about this, I said my problem is with the idea of taxing for the schools themselves, because I said first of all, I said when you have all these things on your real estate taxes, I said you got seniors around here that have to pay for these things even though they don't use them. I mean, their kids may be fully grown. They have nothing to do with that institution once their kids are out of it, but yet they're still expected to pay taxes on it. And the point I made, I said, it's the seniors. I said that they're on fixed incomes. They're going to have probably the biggest problem in dealing with this because of the fact that it's not like they can just, ask for a raise. The raises on a fixed income only come whenever Uncle Sam or whoever just feels like doling them out, and that's the problem with a fixed income to begin with. But then when you throw this into the mix and all the taxation and, it's through gradually a tax here and a tax there and a tax here and a tax there. Then eventually you wind up exactly in the same boat as these big city neighborhoods in which it's becoming so increasingly expensive. I know when Trish and I, before we moved here, we used to live in Gladstone, Missouri. And our taxes are way more up there because we were so close to Kansas City than they are down here. But it's through systematic taxation on so many different things, and then the school being the biggest share of it. This is how you wind up gradually getting it to the point where it increasingly becomes more and more expensive to even live here, if it keeps going. And this is what we're attempting to try to nip in the bud. Number one, this is a rural area. This is supposed to be a rural area. It's a fourth-class city. And as a fourth-class city, we need to quit demanding so many big city entities because this is how eventually it becomes every bit as expensive to live in a fourth class city as it does in a first class, second or third or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sam. And once again, I mean, we could come full circle and come back to the initial issue. Was it something the school really needed? And of course, they did throw stuff in there they needed with what they didn't. They threw in the needs with the wants, and the wants was a much heavier price tag, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, by far, and to the tune of $15 million. And and that's not all. They would have kept on coming back for more. And you got to keep in mind that they hadn't paid off the first school bond, so
Right.
This is piling more. It's a tax that just never ceases because about the time you start getting a handle on stuff, then they just keep adding more and more and piling more on top of it, and it's a debt that never gets paid.
Yep. But
they don't ask for these bonds until the debt's just about paid. Like you had $5 million left over. Okay, well, you think, 5 years ago, you guys had 6 million left on that, and you're paying about one. I thought it was 1.5 million, but I went into the records. I looked at yours and ours, and it's to the tune of about 1.3 million that goes into that 67 cents of taxpayer funds. So, just do the math. You know what I mean? It's like, well, you guys probably are pretty close to having that 5 million, paid off, and it's just building in an account. And that's what another thing people don't know. Those 2 payments that they make per year are just basically the interest payments. But for as long as you guys have had it, so you pay over that time about 1 million of it. Okay. So the people that buy these bonds to make money, or entities, and so just do the math. There's millions in there. How many millions, I don't know. But the thing is that your taxes do not go down that year. That's absolutely true, because they do them before they decide to call them, because they have to do if they plan on rolling the debt and keeping that money, they have to find out what the vote's going to be to decide what they're going to do. And so what they'll probably do now is they may just make a payment and just bank that other money and try for another bond down the road or whatever. But chances are here real soon they're going to be calling for at least to make a payment, a fairly sizable one on it, and just, make a decision from here forward on how to proceed.
Yeah.
But they could call it this year for next year pay off, because it takes a year. You have to do it at like a year in advance to call that bond. You can't just go, oh, well, here's the money, boom. You have to give advance notice that you are going to pay it off. So no, your taxes never go down the year that a bond issue is up for a vote. Never, ever. Especially when they're planning on rolling it. But when that is going to get paid off, it's how much is in the account. That's the question. That'll give you all you need to know, because you know how much you pay into it.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, guys, I just want to interject. On Facebook, I saw the plan is to try again in November of next year for another bond. People are already posting November of 2024.
That gives, I suppose, the grassroots plenty of time to present an argument against having a performing arts center yet again. So I bet that's a good thing if they give you that much time to prepare for it. But honest to God, it was a close vote, so I don't blame them for trying it again. But, I wish they wouldn't, obviously. But, safety and security issues, right?
Somebody needs to email.
Yeah.
And find out how much is in that account.
Yep.
That bond levy account. That'll give you a pretty good window and understanding of, the direction needs to go. Like I said, they could have internal debt, and that's another thing people don't know either. They can take out shorter term loans and not have to bother for a vote, because you don't vote on them.
Well, one thing for certain, whether they bring it back again or whatever, the same argument still stands.
Yep, it does. And they'll probably use the same language again, too. So knowing, they're, basically the track they've been on so far. But this is, for those of you who are watching this today, this is a real life situation where a grassroots organization actually went out there and started educating the public and defeated a school bond. Now, it wasn't because of a dilapidated school building. something the school district would need. It was for a performing arts center, and that's going into this economy that we're going into right now. Sam alluded to it earlier, and we'll talk about it more, a little bit later, which is basically the dollar, losing world reserve currency status. What does that look like, a year from now, 2 years from now? And we'll get into that later, but I think that's a relevant conversation, based on unnecessary school projects. I think should be part of the conversation.
Well, something I would inject in here that I discovered throughout this whole process. We have a lot of people around here who seem to think that things are just going to always be the way they've always been. And that's a bad trap to fall in, because if the economy does wind up totally collapsing, because as we've all talked about bank failures that are going on, and various other issues like we were talking about a while ago, the BRICS nations pulling out of the dollar, which we'll get into later. But the point I'm making out of all this is that there's a normalcy bias that we have to fight here. And
Yes.
On the one hand, you don't want to scare people, but yet on the other hand, you have to remind people that it's just common practice that when you're in a bad economy, that you pull back in a bad economy. Now, if something happens and things do wind up better, then great. That's great. I'm happy. I'm glad things are better, but we're at a point where it doesn't matter what puppet gets put in that White House or whatever, on Capitol Hill, or Congress or whatever. This system is too far down the crapper for any difference to be made on a federal level. Now, on a state level, we've been talking about the issues with gold and silver. On a state level, we could certainly do better on that front. But even so, the point of the matter is that the first ones that are going to be bit in the rear end by all of this are the ones who can least afford it, and that's the seniors. And how anybody can just recklessly go after all these things and not take into account the amount of seniors that we have living here, particularly. It's going to be hard on everybody, but they'll feel the pinch the quickest, because they can't just go out and just demand a raise. You can go to your boss. You're working. You can at least go to your boss and sit down and say, "Hey, guy, things are kind of tough, and kind of negotiate a raise with your boss, but good luck negotiating a raise with Uncle Sam, if you're on Social Security or something, and so, and that's the thing. And then you got to take into account the average income of the average person here in town. This is not a rich town. These are people that are, that a lot of them are poor. We have a lot of renters here, unfortunately. That's bad, because a lot of times they'll vote for it because they think they're insulated from it. They're not, because it's factored into their rent. But nevertheless, the point of the matter is,
and then they get mad at the the landlord because the rent went up. Well, that's because their taxes went up.
That's exactly right. Yep.
You pay it, maybe not directly, but indirectly, you pay the taxes. So if you're voting in taxes, well, guess what? Your rent is going to go up next time your lease comes up.
That's right.
That's just the way this works.
Yeah. And, the landlords are not going to absorb these taxes any more than corporations absorb taxes. You hear all the time about, taxing corporations and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't work. No business, any business that you tax, I don't care if it's a business, I don't care if it's a landlord or whatever, they're not going to eat that tax. They're just going to pass it on down the line. And the one who's going to eat it is the one who's at the end of the line. And that's the person either buying from the corporation or renting from the landlord or whatever. That's where the buck always stops at the end. And it's the person at the bottom of the ladder that winds up shelling out all the money for these taxes.
Yeah. And, you know, Retha brought up a really good point too. A lot of renters think that they don't pay property taxes. Hey, I
That's
don't pay
right.
property taxes. You know, it's, yes, you do. It's buried in your rent because the landlord, the guy who owns the house, the gal who owns the house is getting a tax bill from the county.
Yep.
And they're passing that right on to you in the rent. They're not going to eat the taxes for you because you're a renter. You know, it's buried in the rent. It's always been that way. Always been that way.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's buried in your car. It's like it's there. Read your statement. So you do pay them. Doesn't matter who you are, you're paying them. So it's for the children. Well, what about little Johnny and little Susie, parents that are just trying to make ends meet? I think little Johnny and little Susie need a roof over their head and food to eat is more of a priority than a performing arts center. I'm sorry. It's just, we have to get real about this. We got to make sure that, the community can make it through this as well. Because if you don't have a community, you don't have a school anyway. So it all feeds each other. But but there has to be a fair balance and a respect.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And once again, this should be a good story. I mean, this is actually where you can see where, basically people can make a difference. You can defeat an unnecessary school bond. It can be done. And for those who think it's impossible, the schools always get it. Believe me, I've lived a good portion of my life like that too. It'd always go out and vote no, but I never thought of actually trying to stop it before 2016 is when I first, figured out, along with Retha, that we could actually make a difference in our local community, and we could, actually start questioning these unnecessary school bonds, start digging into the school finances, start looking into their debt. These books are important. The people don't know. They don't know how much debt the school is in usually. They don't know how much is left on the bond. They don't know if there's internal debt. Go ahead.
You want? Okay, I didn't know if Retha wanted to go or whatever, but I just simply say this, and that is that by the time they come back with this thing in 2024, the rate things are going, reality will probably have already set in by then, because it's not going to take long for all the stuff we're seeing as far as the country's pulling out of the dollar and everything else, for all this to start to ripple down through the system. And all I can say is, for those people out there who are in favor of this, don't say we didn't warn you when hyperinflation sets in, because there's a good chance that when the dollar loses its reserve status, and this is just one of many things attacking the dollar, but when the dollar loses its reserve status, we have history on our side to tell us what happens when that happens. And at this point, with so much mismanagement and corruption, I wouldn't be a bit surprised at all if we don't wind up with a depression, for two reasons. Number one, just by default with what's happening with all these other nations. But secondly, a depression would work in the best interest of those people who want to try to corral everybody into a central bank digital currency. And so either way, we're headed for difficulties in a way that we're not used to. And when it gets down to a point where people are just barely able to afford the next meal, then you're going to start to understand what we've all been talking about out here.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something even more interesting. I may be digging a little too deep here, but I don't think so. Anytime you vote in a tax, it's a wealth transfer. And it could be a wealth transfer to your city, your county, your state, or your federal government. But the fact is, they have more and you have less. And I would consider, basically any unnecessary school bond a simple wealth transfer from the people to literally the government school. I mean, is that too fundamental? Is that putting it up under too much of a microscope from your point of view, Sam?
No, I mean that's exactly what it is. And I mean we've been indoctrinated so much over the years. At one time everybody used to accuse the Democrats as being the ones doing the wealth transfer and all this kind of stuff. But now we really see it across the board. I mean, it doesn't matter who's in. The point of the matter is it's a bipartisan problem now. I always say that the only difference between a Republican and a Democrat is a Republican is a disgruntled Democrat that'll wind up being a Democrat by the time it's over with, because they'll gradually move that direction. But where all this ties in is the fact that we've all been raised that traditionally, well, it's those Democrats that always want to do a transfer of wealth and all this kind of stuff, and they still are the ringleaders in it. But I see this all over the place. On both sides of the aisle now. When somebody wants something, it doesn't matter. I mean, we've had both sides of the aisle over the past few years, and I will remind you that the lockdowns that we had were not started by the Democrats. They were started by Republicans, and then the Democrats just latched onto it and just kept pushing it. So it's a bipartisan issue, and the lockdowns are a big deal here because they also factor into this with the amount of people that once we've had the lockdowns that just never returned back to the school. So we're having a declining enrollment on top of it. And I would venture to say that in the next few years, the big winner out of all this is going to be homeschooling, not public schooling.
Retha says something that I always find interesting. She says a lot of these schools, particularly in the rural areas, the rural communities, they want champagne, but they only have a beer budget. And so at any rate, they're willing to put their communities into debt so they can start sipping on that champagne. Retha, do you care to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what people don't seem to realize is, especially in these smaller communities, when you don't have as much business and stuff helping out with the taxes and everything else.
Property taxes on business is what you're referring to. Yeah.
Yep, property taxes. And when you don't have that, well, it puts more pressure on the community. They have to have higher levies then, up to get those things, and that they need. And so you have that contingent in the schools too. Oh, we should have a larger sports program or a performing arts center or and.
Mm-hmm.
You have those ones bending the ear, but they don't understand the finances and what that's going to all entail. Because, you go ahead and purchase it. Well, now it needs maintenance. Well, that more money the school has to spend too. That's why I say there has to be that balance. It's like if there's really something specific that you want your kid to be enrolled in, and you go to a small town and you expect them to have it and you're pushing them to have it, well, you need to go and move to where a school offers that. You shouldn't go and have a community pay for something that you want, because these small towns want to compete with these bigger schools that have all these different things. Well, it's because they have more of a pot to draw from.
Mm-hmm.
They have industry, or they have industry, they have business and everything else that shares in that, so that they don't have to raise those levies so high. They can keep their levies a little bit lower because there's more paying into it. And it's like, well, then you have to move to those places where those things are offered. You shouldn't be asking a school that, barely has the beer budget to start offering yet more programs or more buildings to accommodate, the performing arts center. for the example. And it's like, well, you know what? They have a wonderful program where they have, you know, that we don't have here. That I'm like, wow, that is amazing. They have like wood shop and metals, and they even have something with computers, I think. Um, they offer all those programs at your school, and I'm like, wow, that is just outstanding. That's amazing. That's real world stuff. And I'm going, I would want to enroll my child in that school versus the one we have here, and so I would move to there. Going, yeah, because they offer stuff that you need to learn. This is, and that'll teach you how to measure. That'll teach you how to, do angles and, problem solve and everything else. And you can kind of get that reverse learning or applied knowledge with that. And it's not that Owensville doesn't have a lot to offer. It just, you shouldn't stretch not only the school on what it can offer, but, the community as well. There's only so much money. You guys have 4 schools. You have 2 elementaries, middle, and a high school. And that's a lot to manage. Even, with the money that they do get in revenue. And so so that has to all be considered. Those buildings need repair and maintenance too. And that's what the bonds are for. They are for repairs, maintenance, buildings, or
School
additions.
buildings as opposed.
Yep, school
Okay.
buildings. That's what they're for. And they become something else. Oh, bigger sports, programs and different things like that. Yeah, those are neat extracurricular activities, and I'm not saying they don't have value, but we got to get back to the basics because a lot of the schools are not doing so well in the academic department. And to go and put more money into something that's really not going to contribute to the academic aspect, I think is not money well spent. Also, another thing schools have to think about as well that nobody talks about and nobody realizes. If they look at the census data, we're having less and less kids. And it went off the cliff about 2 years ago. This year, it's still off that cliff. 2 years in a row now. So they're not going to see it for another 3 years. It's going to be kind of business as usual. That there's a decline, but it's minimal. It's not. They aren't going to see that take effect for another, maybe 3 years. And that's a concern too, because the state only pays per head. So, and they depend on that state revenue as well. So if there's a lot of things I think schools need to brace for impact. They should try to get rid of any debt that they have, and anything they need to get fixed, they should do now before the real inflation starts. They should be thinking smarter, not working on keeping up with other schools to have more. Because it's like, no, that's not the way to think. You need to brace for impact, just like.
Well, one of the things I'd kind of like to see come out of all this, really, if these schools want this stuff so bad, why don't they operate on the issue of donations? That way, those people who are really behind all this stuff and want to, they can voluntarily donate to the cause. I mean, we've had, over the years, we've had some very rich people. You would never know it by meeting them, but we've had some very, very rich people that have started projects here in town, like a sports complex type thing and various other things. And then but what they always do is after they start them, then they spin them off to the city, and then they become part of the city parks and recreation and whatever. And but I'm saying basically what needs to happen is kind of a donation model. Just keep working at it, and those who want to contribute can donate to the cause, and those who don't have to donate. That way, it's not compulsory. And it's harder that way. But anything worth doing, if you really think that it's worth it, then ask people who can afford to donate. Several people donate to the cause, can start putting money in the coffers to make these things possible over time. And that kind of thing. I'd much rather see that than the way they do it now.
Well, yeah, because they want everybody's money, and they don't realize what everybody's money is going to entail. I mean, that's over the years, that's about $2,000 out of your home, and that's something people don't think about. They don't think about those numbers. That it's not just a few bucks. It's cumulative. It's thousands, and it's like this is for just a want. We're not even talking about the needs. Just for that want, it's going to be about a couple grand of your property tax that's going to go into that. And then they get upset. Oh, well, I can't believe you didn't vote this in. Well, that's a couple $1,000s that I'm just not willing to give for something like that.
Yeah, particularly on, once again, it could be argued that this is an unnecessary school project, particularly when it comes to trying economic times. And I remember in that meeting, I heard this, in the video from the meeting. We've been through hard times before. We always get through them. This time it's different, folks. Losing the world reserve currency is a little bit different than a few banks going belly up. Trust me, this is not going to be pleasant. And it's happened in history before. We can bring up examples of that later. But people have to be aware. Hold on for a couple of years, because actually I think what's about to hit us will be pretty much complete within 2 years. When I'm talking about the world sending dollars back to the United States and not wanting them anymore. And we'll see what the result of that is. But actually, it's probably come to that point now where I should ask both of you, what was involved in actually starting a grassroots action to educate the folks on what was going on with the school financials and actually ultimately defeating the bond?
Well, basically, this was one of those things that got kicked off on very short notice. I mean, we had just a few weeks to work with when we decided to organize. And but I was very, very, very impressed with how well we all worked together on this, and how well, when an obstacle was thrown up in our face, we just flipped a U-turn and went another direction, and still got what we desired, and that was a place to meet. And that was probably the biggest obstacle we had. But within 24 hours, we had it all flipped over to the library. After the business we were meeting at decided that they were going to get cold feet, we just flipped the script. And once, Trish was the one that found out first, and Trish took it upon herself to call the library to get the ball rolling. Then I came upstairs from what I was doing down here, and she told me what had happened. And so then we got a hold of everybody else. I sent out an email on my list, and it didn't take long at all before we had that thing totally flipped over to the library. And it went over. I mean, it was just amazing how well it worked. And the problem is you get a lot of these people who think that, well, if I allow them to meet there, then I'm going to be looking at as supporting this resistance against the school bond. The library handled it properly. They just put up a sign saying that they were in no way affiliated with the organization. They allow all groups to meet there, and they don't have basically their sign in so many words said, "We don't have a dog in this hunt." And they handled it right. In fact, they asked me if it was okay to put up a sign like that. I said, when I talked to one of the people from over there, I said, "You got my blessing on it. Put it up there." because I said that's what everybody else should have done a long time ago, and it would have avoided all this confusion. But see, there's a lot of people. Well, I'll just put it to you this way: it was a local bank where we were meeting here, and they were afraid that a lot of people were going to start pulling their money out of that bank because of the fact that they were not going to be, well, let me put it to you this way: they were afraid that people were going to look at the bank as taking sides in this, and all the bank would have had to have done was put a sign up. They got a nice vestibule there where you come in. They could have put a sign up there so that anybody with any questions would know right away. We provide a meeting room to all with no bias one way or the other, for or against. And, there's various ways you can word it, but I think the library really did us a great, not only us a great service, but everybody a great service, because there's going to be people who are going to meet in that library that perhaps that we all disagree with too. But the point of the matter is the room, if it's going to be a community room, then it should be available for everybody. And the library handled it correctly.
Okay, gotcha.
No, absolutely.
Guys, we don't have a lot of time left before the cutoff for KEYK. So what else was involved? I know there was a meeting, there were some signs, that sort of thing. Anything else going on? I meant basically signs being put out in the public, letting them know it is a tax increase, because of course it said it was a no tax increase bond issue, which was very deceptive language, to be sure.
Yeah, it's a continuation of an existing tax is what it is. But even though that's approved language, it doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean it's okay. Because unfortunately, people don't understand what that means. It's a continuation of an increase that you're already paid. And because these go on for so many years, most people have no idea. They don't, because it's not separated on your bill. It's not, oh, here's an extra tax. No, it's all lumped together. So they have no idea. They have no idea that levy's all lumped together, and that there's an additional tax in there that you're paying, that you vote in to pay.
Yeah.
So that's what's deceptive about it.
Well, this was definitely. Go ahead.
It's a hidden tax, is what it is.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sure. And this is a great story too, because this is something where I think in the community, and we've got under a minute left here, so I'm going to wrap it up. Well, basically, you had a community where everyone was pretty certain that this tax was going to go through. It was just going to go through. Yet there were some folks in the committee saying, or in the community saying, hey, we might not be able to afford this. The language is deceptive, and they're mixing in wants with needs. And the community, people in the community came together to educate the folks on their point of view, which the school didn't provide. So this is definitely a wonderful story for folks that feel that they can never get out of these tax bonds that the schools run every so often in their communities. We have to cut it off here for KEYK. The listening audience of KEYK. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. With us tonight, we had myself, Patrick Holland, co-hosting with Sam Britton. Our guest has been Retha Holland, talking about the school bond issue in Owensville, Missouri. Thank you very much for listening in, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, guys, we'll continue on now at this point.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about the cutoff, the sharp cutoff.
No, I know.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I didn't even say, Sam Britton with Missouri Liberty Radio, so, plug you on KEYK. But I think, guys, if you don't mind, or if Retha, if you want to stay with us for a while, and we can start talking about the larger issues that are going on right now, which is, basically the dollar losing world reserve currency status. This is horrifying. There's by the way, it's not going to be all gloom and doom, folks. It's not going to be all gloom and doom. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and that light reflects very well off of silver. And we'll talk about that. The gold and silver bills that are going on around the nation is astounding. We're talking 22 states around the United States that are doing that. Hey there, John. So, I think, basically with the dollar losing world reserve currency status, I think is a bigger story now that OPEC countries are getting involved. Mexico is getting involved as well too. And that's the reason why I think a lot of folks were a little scared about maybe that school bond going through at Owensville. Is we really do look like our dollar is under siege. It's truly under siege. This is not a joke. This is not a Lehman Brothers collapse. This is far, far worse. And we have had, what is it? Silicon Valley Bank. I think it was like the 18th largest bank or something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that one collapsed, so it's kind of like a Lehman collapse, but now it goes forward into more treacherous, territory, which is countries not wanting to use the dollar, for oil.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, it may sound like there's a lull in the action for right now, but the other thing that people have to keep in mind right now, and that is the fact that, first of all, this crisis is of the federal government's own making. And they're at a point, first of all, switching us over to a private bank like the Federal Reserve. And by the way, even though it's called the Federal Reserve, there's nothing federal about it. Just look it up. Go to any big city telephone book and look it up.
Private bank.
Find it. Yeah, it's a private bank. It's not federal. It's no more federal than Federal Express. But the point out of this whole thing is that they did it. This has been actually brewing quietly in the background ever since the Federal Reserve Act was passed back in 1913. We've already been through one depression since then, even though we were told and promised that the Federal Reserve would avoid these very things. It didn't take long to find that out, that was a joke. And then we got the New Deal out of that whole mess. And then as time went along, let's jump forward, move the tape forward, so to speak, to the 1970s, when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And that's when all this hyper spending really took off in earnest. And we've been under that situation ever since. And we're at a point now where the national debt is well over $30 trillion. That's almost unimaginable to even think of. But there's no way that we could ever pay that back. And see, the Federal Reserve, they're laughing all the way home on this whole thing, because the government just keeps coming and borrowing more and more and more, raising the debt ceiling, borrowing more and more and more. And the Federal Reserve is all the more eager to let them have it, because guess what? What most people don't know is that each and every single one of us, without our permission, are collateral for that national debt. And that's a scary thought when you start to think about it. And the point being is that there is going to be a time when all this stuff is going to come home to roost. It's already started. The COVID mess was actually more of a political move to advance the final stages of the dollar's collapse than it was anything about a virus. That's the thing that people have got to wrap their arms around. This was purposely done in order to move us into this situation where we are now. A lot of businesses were thrown under the bus, particularly mom and pop businesses, and they will be the first ones to suffer when the rest of this falls apart as well. And this is why the states are going to have to jump to the rallying cry of all this kind of stuff. And we got that going on with the gold and silver. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is an alternative. Gold and silver is constitutional. It's what was originally considered legal tender to begin with. And not only is gold and silver constitutional money, but it's biblical money as well. And you just don't have these problems in the same way with gold and silver that you have with a Federal Reserve note, which is basically just a piece of starched linen with writing on it, backed by nothing. It used to be backed by gold and silver. If you want to if you want to try to prove us wrong, go to a Federal Reserve Bank, take a wad of your dollar bills down there, and ask the Federal Reserve Bank to pay you in gold and silver and see what happens. It ain't going to happen because the dollars aren't backed by gold and silver.
Before 1971, they would do that for foreign folks. They wouldn't do it for us here in America. We couldn't get, gold for our dollars because it was illegal for us to own gold. Remember that?
That's right.
So, but people were coming from Europe with treasuries and in some cases bonds, and they knew America was overprinting. So they would actually go and trade in those pieces of paper for those gold coins. And of course, then the window was closed by Nixon temporarily, by the way. And that was in August 1971, temporarily removing us from the gold standard. Of course, Johnson took us off the silver standard in 1964. So at that point, all metals were demonetized. Silver and gold were demonetized. States have the ability to bring that back. The Federal Reserve's not going to do it. They have no interest in doing that because they can't turn on the printing presses and spit out gold coins with their printing presses. They can't do that. So it's got to be mined. There's energy and effort. As I always tell everyone, every gold coin, every silver coin you have is compressed energy. And that's exactly right. So whereas, like $100 bill and a $1 bill are both worth 20 cents. It's about 20 cents to print one of those. And that's about all it's really worth. And when you talk about intrinsic value, you can use the dollar for wallpaper, toilet paper, and things of that nature. But gold and silver, go ahead. Fire starter, yeah. Gold and silver, very necessary for industry. It has intrinsic value much beyond monetary use.
Yeah, absolutely. And the states are working on this, but, even so, it's going to change how everybody handles their finances when this goes down in the end for the good. If we stick with gold and silver, it could be a negative if we wind up all groveling on bended knee toward the central bank digital currency, because now on the other hand, the central bank digital currency, they will control everything you buy. They will tell you what vendors you can buy from versus which ones you are not. And I'll lay out a little scenario here for you. Let's look at it from this standpoint. Let's say we all go out to a restaurant and we're all going to sit down and we decide we're going to buy a meal, and we're all on the central bank digital currency. So we go out to eat. We all sit down. We have our meal. One of us goes up to pay, or however you do it with the central bank. I think it's going to be central bank digital currency. It's going to be more like something that you do through your cell phone or something like that, your smartphone. But you decide to pay for that meal, and let us suppose they decide that, you know what, we're not going to back that. We're not going to allow you to pay for that meal with the central bank digital currency. So now all of a sudden, you have nothing else to go on. The business is out the meal because the central bank digital currency, they decided that business is not on their list of vendors. So that business ultimately winds up going under. In fact, what will most likely happen if we go to a central bank digital currency, all the any eating establishments will have to collect before they serve you. Is the only way that's going to be able to happen, because and it's probably not going to be mom and pops, because I guarantee you the way they're going to handle this is the way they handled COVID. They're going to shut down all the mom and pops because large chain businesses are a lot easier to control than a bunch of renegade mom and pops. And like, for example, around here, we have a lot of mom and pops that are in fact, one of them I know of here locally. I talk to the owners all the time, and they said people paying by cash has just skyrocketed in recent months compared to what it has been. So there are some people out there starting to get the message. But I think the main thing that I want to point out of all this, part of what we're also fighting too, is that most people turn on things like the evening news on their televisions, Fox News, The major TV networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to get the information from there that you would be getting on shows like this and others like it. They have a vested interest in keeping it quiet. And one of the reasons for that is, and it came out a few years back, there was a story that broke several years back about various TV networks and TV stations throughout the United States having CIA operatives operating in their newsrooms. And the story that broke that we covered back at that time is like 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe a little more, but it was in the South Carolina station where the news really broke of this actually happening. And so it's been over a period of time that independent media has sprouted up to really keep the people informed, as opposed to what we've been putting up with, just having everything handed to us while we sit on the couch and play with a remote control. Those days are gone. So if you're a person who gets most of your news from ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, and all that, you're going to have to turn that stuff off if you expect to really find out what's really going on, and start looking to alternative news organizations and websites to really find out what's going on, because there's a whole nother picture out here, and they're not interested in telling you about it any more than they're interested in you learning about the real issues behind the COVID scare. I mean, they lied about that, and we all know now. I think more and more people are coming to the conclusion that they've been lied to regarding all this. But you got to understand that if they lied to you about that, then what is to prevent them from lying to you about anything else? You have to carefully scrutinize everything that you're hearing and that you're seeing, because we live in a world of special interests that thrive best when you are in the dark. And that's the thing that I would simply have to say on all this. And I think this is part of the reason we have the normalcy bias, because most people, with the exception of people like myself, John, and increasingly more and more people around town here. I mean, I know others besides us who pay close attention to alternative media to find out what's going on. But there's a sizable amount of people I know, because I talk to them. They think they're getting stuff, everything they need to know from people like Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, all these people. I call them corporate conservatives. They're part of the corporate media establishment shills labeling themselves as conservatives. But in reality, they're backing things like a constitutional convention. They're backing all the stuff that would be detrimental to this country. And I'm saying you're not getting, just because they call themselves conservative or whatever, doesn't mean anything. And so my advice is just break that habit, start a new habit of getting your news from alternative sources. And above all, always be a critical thinker. Don't let anybody just hand you stuff. I always send out where I get my news from when I send out on my email list. And we all try to make sure we vet our sources. Mainstream media just tells you, sit on the couch. We'll give you all. CNN used to have a saying, all the news you need to know. And what if I want to know more? Well, sucks to be me then, huh? I guess. So
yeah,
anyway.
kinda.
Yeah.
Especially if that's your the only news you're consuming. In fact, I would take what Sam said and take it a step further. Don't pay attention to federal politics. It's a dog and pony show. There's really nothing you can do about it anyway. Get involved with your state and make a difference. Make positive change in your state. Consider that an option rather than, consuming, news about how horrible things are in, the federal government. And, we started this conversation with talking about the dollar losing the world reserve currency. But like I said, there's a light at the end of that tunnel. States are actually activating. They're doing something to start protecting their citizens. And that's gold and silver as legal tender. You can get out of the dollar with gold and silver, and hopefully businesses will catch on. No one's being forced to use gold and silver with the exception of the federal government under the Missouri bill. Grant in the chat here put in something interesting. He was talking about Texas's bill, and they're doing a gold-backed digital currency in Texas. I'm sorry, they're not necessarily doing it. They have a bill, actively running around in their legislative body right now to actually do that. And it was just a matter of time, because that's what everyone was talking the East was going to do. China was going to back their yuan, a digital yuan with gold. So, I mean, that's, once again, an interesting idea. If you don't hold it, you don't own it, though. I always like to say, but that is another option that's out there. And I also, too, I mean, if you don't mind, I'm going to switch gears here real quick. Just because this is the Missouri Liberty Report, and that's another thing, is SB 49. John has brought this up on his program before. It's a Mike Moon bill, Senator Mike Moon in the state of Missouri. And it has to do with basically making it illegal, pardon me, for children under the age of 18 years old to actually undergo any surgery to change their sex, or to take any chemical hormone blockers of any kind to actually start that process as well. And that's heating up. That is definitely heating up. In fact, we have a House hearing on that on, I believe it's Tuesday, and I think it's at 4:30. So that's actually going on up in Jeff City here pretty quick. So that continues on. And I just wanted to make sure people were aware of it. There's no really big news story on it, other than it is now in the House and it's starting to move through the House.
Yep, exciting news, and it's got to be done at the state level. I like you though, Patrick. I think gold and silver has to be something that you physically hold, because my problem with anything digital, it's got to have the internet to work, number one. Number two, a digital currency can always have strings attached, particularly if it's any government, depending upon who gets in office or whatever. You got to be very, very careful with a digital currency even backed by a state, because if the state changes hands, then that digital currency could wind up exactly the same way as the central bank digital currency. All it takes is for the right totalitarian clown to get in office, and you got a problem. Where if you got gold and silver in your hand, then it's yours.
And what I would like to say, I mean, I'm sorry for interrupting, but if they have gold and silver as legal tender, and physical gold and silver available for use, basically in society in Texas, along with a digital currency that is backed by gold and silver, I don't necessarily think there's, so much of a problem. It's just yet another option. But you're right. In fact, what you said was very interesting. If the state changes hands, and I paid very close attention when you said that, if the state is, for instance, majority Republican, you would assume that there would be, less chicanery at the finance level of the state. Nonsense. It happens on both sides, gang. But you may have one, basically, you take a look at the Democratic Party during Kennedy's era, and look at the Democrat Party today. Even the parties themselves change hands, from China's hands to, Soros's hands to Klaus Schwab's hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. As long as the digital currency is optional, that's the main thing. You don't want it to be compulsory.
Mandated. Yeah.
Right. And therein lies the issue. The Federal Reserve wants theirs to be mandated or compulsory, where you have to use it whether you want to or not. That's not what we're looking at here. And as long as the digital currency remains an option, I mean, it can be a healthy option as long as it is only an option when you need to pay for something. And, if you have an account that's a gold and silver account, and you can use that digital service as an extension, much like we do with credit cards when it comes to paying for things like we traditionally do now, then it's one thing. But you don't want the ability to hold physical money in your hands. You don't want to lose that, because once you've lost that, then you really don't have anything. And that's See, that's where the central bank digital currency is going to be such a problem. You're going to be buying things without technically paying for them because there won't be anything but digits changing hands. And meanwhile, all the wealthy international banking cartels will be marching off, laughing all the way, quote unquote, to the bank, no pun intended, while everybody else is out here just paying for things with phantom digits. And therein lies the problem. I mean, once it's all digitized, then it's fully controlled, and we're seeing more and more control taken away from us in all kinds of ways. Anyway, I won't belabor it here, but just suffice to say, if you've looked around yourself and seen more and more devices out on the market, things that we traditionally had full control of, various appliances and things that we use throughout the day and whatever, doing more and more for us, and maybe not in a way that we always like, versus the way we had the choices to select what we wanted. I'm seeing that in appliances. I'm seeing it in cars. They want cars to be to the point where they do everything for you, which is all that's going to do is just make for a stupid population. But what I'm saying is that we're seeing control taken away from us more and more and more on all fronts. And the financial end of this is the final straw. Once they get that accomplished, then they will have achieved full control. And that's why the gold and silver bills are so important. And we must not allow that to happen.
Absolutely. Gold and silver is no nation's money. It's everybody's money. It's God's money. And I think that's the way to go just for that reason alone. Now, basically that's one of the great things about Missouri's bill, SB 100, is we do have an anti-confiscation mechanism there, plus also a mechanism to actually enforce it as well. And I think that's really important too. FDR did take away gold from folks by executive order. It was illegal. He did not go through Congress. He did not amend the Constitution. It was a wholly illegal action. Everyone knew it at the time. Everyone still knows it today. But at the same time, we've seen our government shut down, basically society over, a virus, right? So, what's to stop them from doing something, similarly insane, like trying to confiscate precious metals? So an anti-confiscation measure was, in order, I think, in the bill. But I am really happy to see 22 states try to do something. And Missouri's bill is moving forward, by the way, gang. Tennessee and Arkansas have finished their bills. In fact, Tennessee's has been signed by the governor, and this is for a depository. They have other bills making legal tender law in Tennessee and, things of that nature. That are still moving through their system, but they got their depository done very quickly. It was from the day it was introduced to the day it was signed by the governor was something like 9 days or something like that.
Wow.
So very, very quick. Yes. That's how fast it went through. It's just amazing. And Arkansas's bill went through. I'm sorry. That wasn't Tennessee. That was Arkansas. And that was legal tender. That took 9 days. Tennessee took just over 2 months for their depository. So this is moving at varying degrees of speed through the states, but it's moving very quickly through general assemblies. So is it because people are crazy? Is it because states are crazy and everyone's got a tinfoil hat on? Or is it just becoming very, very apparent that the federal government and the Federal Reserve are not going to come in and help? They're simply going to take advantage of the situation they created to enslave us even further with a digital currency. So the states have to decide, well, you know what? We can either do something for our citizens and actually start, securing our sovereignty of our state, or we can all succumb to the madness and the tyranny that is to come. Those were the two choices.
Yep.
I think.
If you go the totalitarian route, by then it's too late. There's no turning back.
Yeah. Yep. So and well, you can always go back, but there's a lot of bloodshed. Historically speaking, anyway.
There is that. Yeah.
So that's that's the neat thing that's going on with the states right now. And of course SB 49, you know, once again talking about that, where, you know, and this is, we're not the only state doing this, but unfortunately it's gotten to that strange point in history, as someone had put in the chat here, where you actually have to create a law to protect our kids from this medical madness that's going on right now. You know, transitioning kids from one sex to another just because there's a lot of money in it, and so it's encouraged. You know, the whole medical community, including the psychology, you know, community, is saying that, well, this is normal, this is natural, and this is healthy. And no, it's none of those things actually. You know, if someone wants to transition beyond the age of 18, they can. There's nothing to stop them from doing it. We're trying to do is protect the kids. That's what we're trying to do in Missouri. We're not trying to tell people what to do once they're legal adults.
Yeah. One thing I'd add to that, Patrick, is that if you want to see where countries wind up when they go down these roads, like all the crazy stuff we're seeing now, just I don't know how much of the audience have any of you out there have studied the Roman Empire. It's a classic case of what happens to a nation when we adopt things like this, because the Roman Empire did not die from a foreign invader. It decayed from the inside out. And
Sure.
That's the thing that people have got to understand. It died from within. Too many bread and circuses and things to keep people distracted. The only difference between them and us is they didn't have the radio and the TV for all the sporting events and stuff like we do now, but they still had the Colosseums, the Roman Colosseums. So they still had their distractions. And even today, I mean, I see it all over the place. I know a lot of people out there who they can tell you anything they want to know about sports, but they know absolutely nothing about anything going on in the world today. And that does not bode well for a declining nation. That just further accelerates things. And then when you see a story like I ran into the other day, I think this was in Pennsylvania, but it was a story that nevertheless documents the decline, and that was a business that was putting on an Easter egg hunt for children in a community. And when they opened the doors, they had instructions on how it was supposed to go. The kids were the ones that were supposed to be doing the Easter egg hunt. They had the rules all laid out as to how it was supposed to go, so everything would go orderly. And what happened was the adults made absolute fools of themselves, so much so that the business in this particular community, and I'll have to go and look up the article because I heard it from one of our hosts here on Missouri Liberty Radio the other day. But anyway, they're not going to do any more Easter egg hunts because the adults acted like absolute buffoons when they opened this Easter egg hunt, and the adults were the ones that were worse than the kids. And that doesn't bode well when the adults are the ones that act like maniacs and stuff. I mean, we got a lot of problems with people as far as their demeanor, their mannerisms, and that kind of thing. And,
mental illness.
Yeah. And I mean, so this does not bode well. I mean, when you have a nation that basically, for the most part, I mean, we don't have an exact figure, but I can guarantee you could probably go any of you listening to the sound of our voices could probably go outside your door, and somebody within a block of where you live, unless you live way out in the middle of nowhere, is probably taking some sort of psych meds. Mm-hmm. Guaranteed. It's come out now that the shooter in Nashville that shot that school up over there was under doctor's care, they said, for a mental disorder. Well, I put 2 and 2 together, and I always come up with 4 on that issue, and that means that she was most likely on psych meds, which further screwed with her ability to make decisions. I'm saying with all these things, these are all the things that I'm bringing up right now are all cracks in the monolith that do not bode well for a nation's prosperity. And but again, this is why we have to come back and double down on, as parents, have to double down on how children are being raised, how children are being taught, and no tolerance for these kind of people that just want to be maniacs and go and stir up fights in grocery stores and Easter egg hunts and all kinds of stuff like that. But I'm telling you, this is scary stuff when you start seeing people behaving like this. We not only have a problem as far as the federal government, we have a moral problem.
Yes, we do. I agree. And it's systemic, just like the monetary problem. Isn't it funny how while the dollar's collapsing, we also have, severe mental illness. We have, I don't know how much more I want to say, on YouTube, but I mean, these things are all linked. They're absolutely linked, and it was true with the fall of Rome too.
Yeah. Yep. Study your history. Always, it's amazing to me, Patrick, how few people, when I talk to them out there, know anything about the Roman Empire. They've never heard of it.
Yeah. Well, we're the last extension of the Roman Empire right now. America is the Roman Empire. It never left. The Roman Empire never really truly left. It just shifted from different parts of old Rome, and then by extension to America, New Rome. That's what's happened. But now the power is shifting to the east. The money and the power, the gold, the industry, it's all shifting to the east. And we saw that coming a mile away. Unfortunately, there was just far too much greed in Washington, D.C., and they baited traps, and the traps were laden with money. It was all corporate greed, political greed, basically, that allowed the power and the manufacturing and the gold to go to the east. So I guess our time is up, with the world reserve currency and the Roman Empire. And it's unfortunately, gang, that's just the way it's going. There's really nothing anyone can do about that. But what we can do is protect ourselves in our state. There was a question in the comments section here from Dan, and thank you for the question, Dan. And hello to Aurora Borealis from Twitter. Thank you for joining us on YouTube today. Dan had asked what it looks like. What does the state look like after this is passed? That's an interesting question, because what it looks like is basically free markets coming in. It looks like bullion banks coming into, Missouri that we can use, as we would use a commercial bank. It looks like stores, taking gold backs and I would say gold and silver coins, basically in payment for goods or services. That's kind of what it looks like. And it allows people another option if they choose to get off the dollar. I suspect businesses will be interested in trading, conducting business with gold and silver. I do think there's a pretty good interest for that in Missouri. Interestingly enough, Wyoming has legal tender law. And I do believe it's something like 30% of the businesses in Wyoming accept goldbacks. I don't have one to show you right now, but it's kind of like using dollars. It's roughly the same size, but what it is it's kind of a gold foil bill. It's not made out of paper; it's made out of gold foil, and it's pressed within it a certain amount of gold, and that's the value of the bill, of the gold back. Actually, I shouldn't call it a bill. And so that's kind of the way they work. So we can still work in the same way we did before. Cash, we have gold backs. Coins, we have silver and gold coins. And then with bullion banks, you can have a debit card that's linked directly to an account that has gold and silver in it. And so basically your life really wouldn't change. It's just you'll be using a money that's actually deflationary as opposed to a currency that is inflationary. In fact, to Sam's and my argument tonight, ultimately hyperinflationary. A deflationary currency is a good thing, because when you go to bed at night, the money in your account is worth a certain dollar amount, and you wake up in the morning, it's worth more. And that's what happens when you have a deflationary currency. When you have an inflationary currency, it's the exact opposite. It's not immediately obvious because we compare the dollar to itself. So a dollar's worth a dollar. But when it becomes obvious, though, Sam, is when people go to the grocery store. I think that's where most people see the inflation today, and the gas pump.
Yeah, in fact, something that I think people need to wrap their heads around on all this is that we look at it as prices going up. No, prices aren't actually going up. It's the instrument you're using to pay for the goods and services, the value of that instrument going down.
That's correct.
That's what we're dealing with here. So think of it as the opposite of what you've been programmed to think. I mean, I'm not suggesting everybody necessarily has been programmed to think this way, but for those who've never given this a thought, think about it this way. You got to reverse your thinking on this. Don't look at it as prices going up. Look at it as you being robbed of your ability to use the instrument, the dollar as an instrument to pay for them. How did this happen? Well, there's several, as we've discussed earlier, several things that have happened along the way, but probably one of the most recent things. How many of us all got those stimulus checks during COVID? How many
I think
of us
everybody
got
got a check.
Got them. Everybody got one, right? Well, see, once again, the more dollars are printed, because that's what they do. The Federal Reserve, the more money is printed, the less valuable the existing money that you're carrying around in your pocket or purse is worth. And so when and I saw it coming when they sent out the stimulus checks, I told everybody around me, including even on my own radio show, I said, enjoy those checks now, because when it finally comes down to the wire here, you're going to wind up paying a lot more. You're going to lose more money than you ever gained by those checks being sent to you is basically what I'm trying to say. And how you're going to lose money is through inflation. And that's exactly what happened. And then now, of course, we got all that money, tons of money now going to Ukraine. So we got that going on. So that adds to the problem. And then when we had the issue with Russia, when the sanctions were imposed on Russia, that hurt us more than it hurt Russia. So everything they've done has actually, to get us to buy into it, they constantly beat us over the head with, oh, those dirty Russians. But yet in the end, the Russians wind up making out like bandits on this thing, while we're the ones that are hurting because of all these things like the issue with Ukraine. And over in Germany, they're even hurting worse with all the stuff that we've done over there. I mean, it's now pretty much conclusive that the federal government was among one of the key players in the destruction of the pipelines over there, and which would have fed natural gas over there to Germany. And so, we're hurting right now pretty bad, but Germany is already where we're going to likely wind up being if we keep going. I mean, Germany is far worse. I mean, it's all they can do. How would you like to see like $1,000 utility bill on a per month basis?
Oh, nonsense, Sam. They're all happy with their solar panels and their windmills out there. They're doing just great.
Oh yeah,
I'm teasing.
No, so great that they're abandoning them.
Yep. Well, actually, they are. They're going back to fossil fuels. They're going back to natural gas energy plants, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And there's even been some proposal of talking about going back to nuclear. Nuclear. Doggone it! I'm so used to everybody saying that word wrong that now I'm starting to say it wrong. Don't get me started on the way people speak wrong, but that's a whole nother issue. But that's one of them.
Well,
so many people say nuclear instead of nuclear.
Right.
But anyway, go ahead.
So yeah, Germany basically made huge investments in alternative energy over a period of about 15 years. And then they announced some year or two ago that they were completely carbon neutral on their power grid. And then suddenly, the cost of power shot through the roof. They were importing power from other countries that were burning fossil fuels to create electricity, and found out that they didn't have enough for winters. And when the natural gas got cut off, which is something that a lot of people that had money in Germany were using for heat, got cut off because of the Nord Stream. And then they suddenly had to pull in from other sources, which created a shortage. And before long, I mean, what Sam is saying is correct. The average family in Germany was paying something like the equivalent of $1,300 a month to heat their home.
Yeah.
And during this winter, and that's not a joke. Actually, you guys can look that up. All those things came into play, but it all started with, of course, well, fossil fuels bad. Alternative energy good. The fact is, alternative energy is incredibly expensive and it's not very efficient, and that's just a fact.
No.
So yeah, we're going to need fossil fuels for a bit longer, gang. Let's not get rid of them. Let's not take shovels to our power plants that are burning natural gas or even coal for that matter. And Sam's right. There's a big push to go nuclear, everywhere in the world right now. And but unfortunately, that itself has its own problems, as we know. Basically Fukushima. They're still dealing with that to this day.
Everything has its risks in energy.
Sure.
If you transport via rail, we've seen how well that's worked here lately. When it comes to transferring various things, whether it be hazardous chemicals or butane or propane or something like that, it's all fine until the train derails and something happens and there's a big fire. Pipelines can have their own disasters, but they are a more efficient way of transferring fuels from one location to another. Nuclear plants, you have the meltdown situation like what happened at Fukushima. So you have to understand there's risk in everything. The one thing I would say as far as alternative energy such as solar and wind, if you want to do them on your own home, Trish and I have solar here on our place. And for a home, for an on-site location, it's great. It can supplement remember, here's the way you have to look at solar and wind. It's not meant to be what they want it to be used for. It's supplemental energy. And it's meant to supplement, like, for example, the way our system works here, we have a grid tie system. During the day, when the sun is out, we're on solar. During the evening hours, when the sun goes down, then we gradually shift back over to the power grid. And it's all seamless. You don't even know what's happening. Like right now, it's late enough that we're probably running off the grid again. But when the sun comes up, we'll be back on solar. It's been wonderful since we've had it put in. However, when you put it on the power grid itself, now you're introducing other things into the mix, because now you have to have large super farms of these panels, and which become very costly, not only to use, but very costly to get rid of when they finally die. And secondly, it's a lot harder to transfer power on a stable basis with these intermittent energy sources tied directly to the grid, because you're always having to constantly balance generator load versus solar and wind and all this kind of stuff. Now it makes things way more complicated. And so it's just, the point of the matter is there's just no place for these things on the grid. On your home, you're in full control of it. And that's the thing. You're not in control of what's going on the grid. And so this is nothing more to just stabilize things, nothing more than to destabilize things when they put it on the grid.
Sure. And as you said before, I meant the governments of the world, at least the green, the green folks anyway, want you to believe that it can be a primary source, and it just can't. It's just not enough, particularly if you have industry. Can you imagine? I try to imagine this from time to time. A steel plant running on solar panels. And I just can't see that, not even with wind power. They're going to need a lot more power than that.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you want steel fabrication in your country, if you want a steel industry, you're going to have something more than alternative energy. But hey, since we're over 100 minutes here, let me ask you this. I know you have a special guest coming up on Sunday night on your show, Sam.
Yeah, had a call come in there. I'm going to have Ron Calzone on Sunday night's broadcast. In fact, I got to hook up with him tomorrow and confirm everything, but everything's a go. He was excited about being on the broadcast. And but it should be a promising show. I've always admired the stuff that Ron has been doing, and the more I learn about Ron, the more I respect him and the more I admire him. The amount of time he has given to help keep this state free long before some of us even thought of getting into this is just absolutely amazing, the amount of time he's put into this. And so it's going to be an absolute pleasure to have him on. He's going to be definitely one of those guests that I'm definitely just absolutely overjoyed to have. So he's going to be on this Sunday. And then ultimately, too, another thing that I want to do before it's over with is we want to have Charles Lewis on. He was on with John here a while back. Some of you remember he was on with John. And I'll tell you what, that was a barn burner show that he and John did. And I'm looking forward to introducing him to our audience as well. And we'll be discussing all things gold and silver when we have Charles Lewis on. So that's just some of the things that we're looking at, along with who knows what else may come unexpected that might be good.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's really cool that Ron is coming on your show as well, because usually, when Ron gets interviewed, and he's interviewed all the time, it's always about a specific bill or a specific action that's happening in Missouri. And I think, basically Ron's story is one that needs to be told. And Ron doesn't talk about his story very much, what he has been doing in the state of Missouri, how he got started, and the kind of things he's accomplished. And he's a humble man, so he may not talk about all he's accomplished. But at any rate, for me personally, the Missouri Freedom Initiative, we're kind of a derivative of Ron. Ron kind of taught me a lot of what I know how to do up in Jefferson City and being active, running an organization, and then working with politicians. I mean, we learned a lot of that stuff from Ron. And I've heard that from so many people across the state of Missouri, that they've learned everything they know from Ron. So, basically it's, I'm going to say this one time, I think, and I'll try not to repeat this again, but Mike Bolden, who runs the 10th Amendment Center out in California, once said on one of his shows that there are only 5 Ron Calzones in the country. And he would know, by the way, because he works with grassroots organizations. That's what he does with the 10th Amendment Center. And the fact is, he didn't say it was 5, Jack Blacks or 5, Sue Does. He said 5 Ron Calzones on his show. So he I think Ron Calzone is kind of the benchmark, basically on what it's like to be an activist in a state and actually get good things done. So very exciting stuff that he is on your show. And that's on 7 p.m. on Sunday night. And that's at molibertyradio.us. Or, of course, it's 101.3 on the FM dial if you're in Owensville. But if you're not in Owensville, you can stream it right on the web. Once again, molibertyradio.us. at 7 p.m. Central Time on Sunday. You don't want to miss this one, gang. Seriously, you don't. It's a very interesting man.
It'll be good. And by the way, for the record, all the issues that were plaguing us, because last week we had Travis on with a prepared homestead, and we had technical problems with our streams out the wazoo. Turned out it was, just to make a long story short, turned out it was a technical problem on this end, and I had to wind up reformatting the hard drive to the server that pushes all that stuff out of here. And I got rid of the gremlin. Everything's been back up now for about a little over 72 hours now, and the machine runs a lot better. I knew there was something wrong because the machine was very lethargic in response when I go to the keyboard and fool with it. And when I try to open applications, and I just knew something was wrong. And I'd bring the streams back up, and they'd run for about sometimes 24 hours, 72 hours, sometimes less, and then everything would just crash on that machine. And it was embarrassing because, you have a guest on, he advertises it to all of his followers on YouTube, and there's no streams to be had. And so anyway, we've got it fixed. Everything's running fine, and we finally got all that behind us. So we should have much better success than we have Ron Calzone on.
Yep. And I've seen in the chat here, a lot of people are talking about friends or family they have in Germany, and that they're having a real difficult time out there. And then I even saw one comment where someone's trying to get back to the United States apparently, and they're having a hard time even getting out of Germany. And our thoughts and prayers are with all those folks out there in Germany, because, like I said, they've had a rough go of it this winter. A lot of Europe has. I think Germany especially, though, just because of the energy problems they had there, which were self-inflicted wounds, by the way, gang. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. The German government inflicted those wounds on their own people, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, and I think we all need to
didn't have to go that way.
Yeah, I think we also need to take to heart on this too, that they were a thriving country just like we once were as well. I think a problem that we have here in the United States is there's a lot of people out there who think that we are an unsinkable ship, so to speak. And I always remark to everybody when I hear that from people, I always say, you want to ask all the people that were on the Titanic about that?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And, it's strange you should bring it up that way, because, we have a lot of self-inflicted wounds right here in the United States, a ton of them. And we're having to deal with the ramifications of those self-inflicted wounds now, gang. So, basically this is why we concentrate on our states, is because we can get a lot more done for the people with a much higher direct impact, basically through the states than we can through the federal government. So, and once again, we talked earlier, and by the way, for those of you just joining us, at the very end of the show, Sam Britton with Missouri Liberty Radio is my co-host tonight. And, I'm very, it's fun to talk to you again, Sam. It's been a while, basically for us, to actually have a chat and on one of these broadcasts and everything. But Sam has a radio station, Missouri Liberty Radio, and it streams 24/7. And he has a lot of programs on his show. Would you mind telling us a few of the programs that, I'm sorry, not on your show, but your show is called Off the Cuff, and that's on Sunday night. But your radio station has a lot of programming on it, 24/7, correct?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I handpick everything because I see the mistakes that a lot of other alternative media outlets make. Or if you want to call it conservative, I'm conservative in some things and more of a free market guy in other things. I mean, basically, to introduce everybody to where I am, I'm a political atheist. I don't back parties. I'm done with that a long time ago. So what we try to do is we try to bring people on that don't, I'm not always successful with it, but I try to get as many people on here who don't put so much emphasis on one guy or one party. And one of the problems I'm having right now is some with the Trump cult out there. These are the same people that back when Bill Clinton was in office, they beat up on everybody that was in the cultic mode with Bill Clinton. And I'm saying you guys are doing exactly the same thing. I'm saying it's time to become a political atheist and back issues. And you'll be a lot better off that way. So I try to concentrate on that as much as I can. The two main people that I run during the day, on the weekday, who are real good at this is David Knight. I don't know how many of you know David Knight. He was with InfoWars, but eventually he eventually parted ways with InfoWars and went out on his own. And he is real good about just calling it as he sees them, no matter whether it's a Republican or Democrat. And then we have another guy that we air during the afternoon by the name of Daniel Horowitz, who is with the Blaze Media. And he's also good about calling out both parties as well. I just try to stick with people that enforce issues, liberty issues, no matter where they come from. In other words, if you're a liberty person, I mean, even strangely enough, it doesn't happen very often, but once in a while you will find a liberty-minded Democrat. I mean, that's surprising, but it does happen once in a while. And so to be just totally one party or the other is just not a good way, to be. I mean, George Washington, who was one of our early presidents, I mean, warned against party politics. And here we are with it now, and it's done more to kill this country than anything. So I try to handpick people that I know are not afraid to go up against both sides of the aisle. And the biggest problem I run into right now is I've got some people out there who they think that, boy, Donald Trump, the sun rose and set in Donald Trump. And I'm saying, okay, first of all, he was in office when we got the lockdowns. He was in office when we got mail-in balloting, which destroyed his very election chances. He was in office when Operation Warp Speed was passed, which took God knows how many lives. And when that happened, he's still out there batting for it. I mean, to this day. I mean, now he's quieted down because I think his handlers have told him to quiet down, but he's still out there, nevertheless, backing the Operation Warp Speed. And I'm saying, we can't have this cult of personality disorder that we seem to have with so many people out there. Stand on the ground of issues, congratulate people, back people when they do stuff good, but don't be afraid to call them out when they do something that is against liberty, that's against prosperity, that is against people's not only happiness, but their ability to live their lives unencumbered by arbitrary government. And both sides, I mean, Trump's done his share. Biden has certainly done his share. The Bush administration, they were certainly pretty totalitarian. They were the ones that gave us the Patriot Act. And then you had the Clinton administration, which did their stuff. Obama did his stuff. We've not really had a government that has been a good free market, liberty-oriented government on the federal level in our lifetime. And that's a shame, but that's where we are.
Yep. And it's a shame. It's truly a shame. It didn't have to be this way. It truly didn't have to be this way. And unfortunately, this is the way it goes. And the biggest indicator of it, of course, is losing the world reserve currency, and then eventually the dollar, just hyperinflates. And, that's the end of America. That's what America represents to the world, is, as a pillar of finance, not necessarily power. Well, we do have power because of our military, but how effective will our military be when we can't afford to buy things for the military? We can't afford to pay the people in the military. So I don't think we'll be, quite as powerful. We'll be a second-rate nation at some point along the way. But I'll tell you what, though, Sam, I'm thinking about wrapping up here, but I wanted to once again thank you so much for co-hosting with me tonight, and basically talking about things of importance for us in Missouri. But we did talk about the bigger problem, and it's not because we want to talk about federal problems or worldwide problems. What we were talking about is Missouri solutions, and that's SB 100. And by the way, it should be execing out of committee, and that means voted out of committee, and that should be on Wednesday of next week. So at that point, it's just a matter of time before, we have one more committee to go through, and then it goes on the floor. So we're getting pretty close to getting our silver and gold bill in Missouri, and we have a really good bill by all measures. Even the Sound Money Defense League says that we have the strongest legislation in 2023. Out of all the other states, we have the strongest. So I'd like to once again thank you all for joining. Once again for those of you who are listening on KEYK, thank you very much for listening in. Those who listen to this show on Sam's Missouri Liberty Radio, thank you for listening in. We appreciate everyone who participates, including those in the chat. I'm sorry I didn't get to all of your comments here this evening, but I am appreciative that you were here for the show tonight. I even saw Tom Martz in here, so hello, Tom Martz. So, yeah, we've had a lot of good friends in the chat. And
Absolutely.
Sam, I'll let you have the final word. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to simply say one of the things that we do with Missouri Liberty Radio is if you listen to us long enough, you'll hear an announcement that comes up at the top of each hour. that kind of exemplifies where we are. And it says, there are those who just want to be left alone and those who just won't leave them alone. Which one are you? That is a crack aimed at totalitarianists. And we put that in there for a reason, and it's become so popular. I've actually had people request a copy of that announcement just so they could have it in their library. So, I mean,
it is a good one. And it
Yeah,
caught
it
my
is.
attention the very first time I was listening to you, too.
Yeah, and that is who we're aiming it at. And by the way, this very broadcast that you're listening to tonight with John Williams will air tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. If you want to go back, maybe you join late and you want to listen to it through us, you can listen to it through us at 7 p.m. tomorrow evening. And then we re-air it again on Wednesdays, twice a day. We air it at 1 p.m. on Wednesday afternoons. And then on Wednesday evenings, we air it again at 11 p.m. So it gets 3 airings here on Missouri Liberty Radio. And I always tell people all the time, John and I go back a long way on all this. John is the closest thing to a brother from another mother that I've ever met. He saw the vision of what we were doing when the station first got going, and he's been with us ever since. And it's just very, very appropriate that he would have a place here on Missouri Liberty Radio. So again, you can catch the show if you want to hear it again tomorrow night in audio form. Just go over there, click on the stream, 7 p.m. Central Time, and you will be connected with Missouri Liberty Report.
Great. Thank you very much, Sam. So we're going to sign out for the show tonight. And I want to thank you all again for joining us. Those of you joined for the first time, those of you who have always been with us, thank you very much. Your time is valuable, and the fact that you're spending it with us means an awful lot to us. And we're not just saying it. Thank you very much for actually spending a little bit of time learning about what's going on in Missouri and why what's going on in Missouri, because of the things that are happening in the world and the things that are happening in the nation. So may God bless this wonderful land of ours. May God bless Missouri as well. Signing off for now, guys. Take care, and thank you, John, for letting me guest host tonight, buddy.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, Sam and Patrick. And I know I sound like an old man right now with my dentures in, but we're just going to end the show right now, okay? So, but seriously, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And hopefully next week I'll have these things figured out for my next guest. So with that, everybody, have a great night. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you next week right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.
Want more freedom? It starts with you. Join us next week on the Missouri Liberty Report and find out how you can get involved to take back your state.